I'm Catherine Sheeran, host of the podcast Horse Tales with Cat. Our guest today is a Grand Prix rider who originally hails from Atlanta, Georgia, and now makes her home in Ocala, Florida. Callan Solem has ridden on 6 Nation Cup teams and represented the United States internationally on 11 occasions. Her accomplishments include winning the 2015 Leading Lady Rider at Live Oaks, California, a 7th place finish and highest placing U.S. rider at the World Cup Finals in Gothenburg, Sweden in 2016. She also had a 2nd place finish at the Nations Cup in Rome, Italy in 2016, and was shortlisted for the 2016 Olympic show jumping team in Rio. She has won countless Grand Prix classes and has amassed over $2.6 million in career earnings, which ranks her in the top 30 of all U.S. riders in the sport's history. Callan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I always like to dive right into your early days. What brought you to horses? Because I feel like everybody has a unique journey.
My mom rode when she was young, and so we were on a beach trip when I was, 10 years old. And we did one of those beach trail rides. And I got back and I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. My mom was very, very good basketball player. They retired her number at UK, and my dad was a professional soccer player. So they were both athletes, and I sort of hadn't found what I really loved to do yet. And the horses, I was just so sure that first time. And I came back and started taking riding lessons, and that was that.
So who did you ride with in your early days?
And so I rode Claudia McQuillan. She's Claudia Rowland now. She's a very, very good judge. A hunter judge. Her father had a business in Atlanta, so I started beginner lessons there with Michelle Menkins Morris, who was a trainer there. Eventually, I ended up, my end of my junior career was with Sunny Stevens, who was just, everyone in Atlanta knew and revered her. She's unfortunately passed, but she is amazing, and she was very much about horsemanship, and she actually got my second to last junior year. I had qualified for the equitation finals and didn't have a horse to use. And so she, through a friend of hers, had connected me with Carol Thompson in New Jersey, because I worked at a grocery store all summer to save all of my money to be able to lease a horse for the finals. And I didn't have enough money to lease one and ship it. So in this scenario, Carol was in New Jersey. So I was going to do the USET finals, and no, Clay finals was at the Meadowlands that year. And so I leased a horse from her that was already there. And then she invited me to come back the next summer to be a working student for her. And so that's how our relationship began. Yeah.
What a fascinating twist of fate.
It was, it was like the worst thing turns out to be the best thing. That happens a lot, I think.
Well, and I think a lot of us can relate to the challenge financially of financing riding. And it's always fun for me to hear how somebody manages to make it happen. Yeah. But it was also interesting to me that from what I read, you were really excelling academically. And if I'm not mistaken, you were was it Wonderhill Academy in Atlanta? When you were
Woodward.
Sorry.
Woodward Academy. Yep. No,
okay.
But it was, I really enjoyed school, and I graduated, actually, I was sort of a year young. So then when I was meant to start Drew University in the fall. And so then when I went to work for Carol, I ended up deferring for a semester, and then I ended up deferring for the year, which would have just made me the same age as everyone else. And then in that time, I was obviously in love with the sport, and Carol had decided she could tolerate me. She was so funny. When I got there, I walked up to her front door, so excited. I only met her just at the finals the year before. And I knock on the front door, and she opens it up, and she said, if I wanted kids, I'd have had my own. And I was like, yes, ma'am. No, I lived in her basement for like 15 years, and we were so close, and she was just the best. But she was really tough. And so by the time the year had rolled around, she had decided I wasn't perfectly useless. And so she had invited me to stay and to be, her rider. I remember I said to my mom, just the only thing in life that I was supposed to do was go to college at that age, Mm-hmm. And so she flew up from Atlanta to visit, and we went to dinner. And I said, so I have this opportunity, and the thing is, if I don't go to college and it ruins my life, I did it. I take responsibility for it. I will either go back or figure something out or whatever. But if you don't let me do this and it ruins my life, then what are we going to do about that? So she said, you make a compelling argument and I want you to be happy and I love you and you can stay if that's what you want. And you have $0. And I was like, right. She had been paying for my phone and car and whatever. So all of a sudden I went back to Carol's and I was like, great news, I can stay. Mm-hmm. But if, at some point, it doesn't have to be right now, but at some point I could start to make some tiny amount of money, that would be great. But I mean, it doesn't have to be right. So anyway, she started paying me like $200 a week or something, which wasn't, enough for much. There was a hotel that was near the farm and I would drive there in the morning and pretend I was staying there and get those tiny boxes of cereal and the fruit and whatever enough to, and of course, if I had told anyone that I didn't have money for food, I mean, certainly somebody would have. But the point was, I said, I'm going to do this. It's fine. I'm going to handle it. And so I took food from the hotel for months until I had saved enough money and was body clipping a little bit for extra money and doing things. So I ended up, it was like maybe, 6 or 8 years later. And I sent them a check for like $500. And because nobody ever said a word to me. I mean, they knew that after a while, I'm sure they knew that I wasn't actually staying there. But so I sent them some money. Thank you so much for not making me feel stupid and not making me feel like a criminal. I really appreciate it. And we just sort of figure out, but it's really how important is it to you, and you can figure out how to get stuff done. I think it served me well.
That's a really touching story on so many levels, even just backing up to the fact that I think your mother was a wise woman because
she is. She absolutely is.
Particularly because I feel you would have resented her so deeply had she not allowed you the opportunity.
Yeah.
And obviously, you always have the chance to go back to school. I feel like that with people all the time. Take your time. There's no rush. So I think that's special, but I also think it's really special that this particular motel where you were going for food, that people, they must have recognized some sort of work ethic in you and noted that you were there every day.
I did always try to like tidy up while I was there, do something useful, but I also would steal a Wall Street Journal because I was terrified of being stupid for not going to school. So it was like,
oh my, love it. Educating along the way.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Carol Thompson, because I understand she is a former Olympian and I actually don't know her story being a Canadian.
She's tremendous. She was sort of in the dawn of the era where women were really making their presence sort of known in the sport. She was with like during Mary Chapeau, Kathy Kuzner, like in that sort of time frame. She was an alternate for the Olympics in Mexico City in 1968. And the interesting part, she had so many amazing stories, but one of my favorites was so back then, the alternate was the alternate for all the disciplines. So if you were the alternate, you were the dressage alternate, the eventing alternate, and the show jumping alternate. So she said at that point she was dating David Broom, who was the great British rider. And so she was excited to go anyway and, support the team and whatever. She said one of the first days that they were there, one of the dressage riders fell or tripped, sprained her ankle or something. And Carol said she was just terrified that she was going to have to do the dressage test. And she said she was bringing her ice for her ankle and just doing everything she could. No, you're going to be able to do this. No, come on, you got this. So she didn't actually end up having to compete in dressage or anything there, but she was a fierce competitor. Her father was I want to say CEO, CFO, something of Johnson & Johnson. So that was, her sister is Judy Richter, who you might remember from she's also an amazing trainer. And they owned horses for Norman Delajoyo, for Ann Krasinski, for Beasy, for Peter Wilde. They really always were tremendous supporters of the sport. And her husband, Carol's husband, Willard Thompson, was a very successful racehorse trainer. And so he was leading trainer at Monmouth Park and Meadowlands and stuff. They did that. So it was in my young days, I got to. So in the beginning, when I first went there, and I was trying to not get sent home or whatever, trying to make myself useful. And Carol came in one day and she said, "Callan, you know anything about breaking babies?" And I said, "Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I do. And she said, all right, well, Willard has a few 5-year-old or a few 2-year-olds that need to go to the track in a few weeks. So you could start those tomorrow. I said, yes, ma'am, absolutely. I'll do that. So that was pre-internet days, obviously. So I got into my car and drove to Barnes and Noble and bought a few books on how to break baby horses because I had no idea. No idea. It was really, I have to say, that was and I did it for a long time after that. But that group was the easiest group that I ever did. It was like, they were like, hey, this girl doesn't know anything. Let's not kill her. Like she's trying really hard, but let's not, we'll just be good. But the thing is, I never wanted her to know that I didn't know. So I'd come in the morning and throw some terms around like, I think I'll back them today. I might, sack them out or do some, whatever. I get started. The only thing that I knew she was going to know that I didn't know what I was doing is if she saw me long lining. Because you know what a mess that is when you first start to learn how to do it. So she would go to the bank, to the post office every day at 3:00. So 3 p.m. is when I did long lining. And so if she wasn't there, I would get myself all tangled in those for, 45 minutes or so until I got good enough that then I could do it while she was watching. But
so, that's hilarious. You were for sure a clever teenager.
I made a lot of mistakes though. One of my favorites was she had said, because we had all these racehorse remakes, the ones that Willard had that weren't fast enough that we were meant to teach to jump and find homes for and whatever. So she said, we're going to take this group to a one-day horse show the next day. So she said, fill the water tank on the van so that water to give them when we get there. Yes, ma'am. And she goes, but Solem. She don't just stand there and watch it fill up with water. So put the hose in, keep working and go back and take it. Oh, yes. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So I she sits on the right side of the van. It's great. So I put the hose in, I go back, I sweep the aisle, do whatever I'm doing. I come back like 10 minutes later. I take the hose out and I'm, oh no, filled the gas tank to the top with water. So, oh no, this is a problem. So she was teaching a lesson or something. It was like 5:00 in the afternoon. I went out and I waited for it to be finished. And I said, excuse me, Carol, I think that I've made a mistake. And she goes, oh, I said, what have you done now? And I said, well, it seems like I have filled the gas tank with water. And she goes, because hold up. She's like, what? How stupid are you? I said, I'm pretty stupid, it seems like. So she said, oh, come here. So she gets the ladder and she sets it down next to the van and takes the hose off the spigot and puts one end in the tank. And she puts it up to her mouth.
On the end.
And she said, like this till it's empty. And I was like, yes, ma'am. So I said, siphoned the whole tank. Fortunately, it wasn't switched to that tank, so it didn't get up in the fuel line. So really, once I drained it, it was totally fine. But it became like her favorite story because she said that the van never ran so well as after I flushed the tank, So the point of that story really is that I made a mistake, but I fixed it. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is like in learning this is a very difficult industry and there are so many nuances to it. And it's so there, you will not make it through life, through sport, through anything without making mistakes. But in fixing them, it showed her who I was. That like, okay, I messed this up, but okay, I will stay with this until it's fixed. And and then same thing with the horses and learning to train them. She was tough though. She used to always say, well, because I was so excited to have horses. I was a professional of them when I was 18 because working for her, and I would be so excited that I'd have whatever horse that I was going to show. If it wouldn't go well or it wouldn't jump clear or whatever. She used to always say, Callan, if you can't figure out how to make that horse jump clear, I will find someone who can. And I would go, no, I will figure it out. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it better.
That would be motivation for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And so in those early years, was there any in your brain thought of, gosh, I'm giving up my amateur status? Did that even come into play at all in the decision making?
No, I was just sorry. I had to wait until I was 18. I was just a junior and then a professional. So I was never an amateur, but I was so excited about it. I just was so clear that this was exactly what I wanted to do. And there's been a lot of conversation about working students and the difficult road that is, and some things about should it be as hard as it is. It's like people talk about, well, she went to whatever girl went to work for someone and it was just so much work. It was that way with Carol, but the gift of it was that when I chose to do this as a profession, which is really, as we all know, more of a life choice because it's
Mm-hmm.
so intense. I knew what I was choosing.
Mm.
And it's not for everyone, certainly. I mean, it is. If to do this well, especially from limited financial means, it's very, very difficult all the time. You have to enjoy and appreciate the things like a horse trying for you, a horse participating in when you say, hey, could you please do it like this? And he goes, yeah, I'll try. If that isn't important to you, it's a tough choice to make because of all the things that you give up, because of the family reunions that you miss, the movies that you don't get to go to, just because you're getting up so early, being up so late. 15 years of night check kept me out of a lot of trouble. I'm sure. But again, I knew what I was choosing because it was very representative of what this sport is really like and what we have, the responsibilities that we have to horses. Like you can't lock an animal up, take away its ability to care for itself, and then not do it. And so that includes feeding on time, making sure they're not too hot, not too cold, not thirsty, not scared. All of those things, if you're going to do that well, takes the bulk of the day.
I can so relate to you because years ago, just for a summer, I was a working student at Ian Miller's. And that just cemented my passion for the horses. I had no plans to go on and do it professionally, but even as an amateur, it really changed how I viewed the sport and how I viewed my mount. So I can fully appreciate that, as you said, it is hard and it is meant to be hard. And anything that you want to achieve in life generally does require a bit of work. So
if you're trying to be better than the bulk of the world at anything, it's going to be hard. I mean, it's like as they say, you don't go for big thrills and expect little disappointments. That's not really how it works.
Mm-hmm. And so what would you say you learned from a training perspective as a rider with Carol that you didn't have before? Because you were with her for a really long time. I don't know, did you transition then from hunters to jumpers, or were you already doing jumpers? I'm not sure what your story.
I was already doing jumpers a little bit, certainly on a very low level before I went to her. But then, I stayed with her and we had some horses that we produced that I got to do my First Nations Cup. I was fortunate enough to have the experience of George Morris as the chef to keep, who was just, such a tremendous experience. And Nona was on my team, and Chris McCrae, and Aaron Vale, and Todd Minigus, all of whom are just to be highly respected. And so that was exciting. And they used to have, back before I did a Nations Cup in Rio, on borrowed horses that they used to do. The USAT used to do that sometimes, where like you could go to, I think Joe Farr just did one like in Egypt or something. They had all these weird places. And so that was really, really cool experience also. And we did that. I was leading international rider at Syracuse, which was huge and probably one of the things I was the most proud of with her horses. And so, it was great. She was very competitive, which was such motivation, obviously, but she really, really loved horses. I remember I had Allison was my first like very, very top horse. I had her out for grass one afternoon, and I knew that was important and that would good. And she came down and she started yelling at me. She said, this horse is not any more important than any of the other horses in the barn. And she was like, she's like, if you're going to take that, she said, you go in and get a different one. And all of these horses are just as important as each other. And so it was really, she was tough, but the best.
I like that though. The fact that, I love the idea that each horse has the exact same value, because I know, again, as an amateur, sometimes I was at barns where the Grand Prix horses were treated differently. And I think what my horse does for me is exceptional as what your horse does for you.
Yeah.
Like my classic on Sunday is my Grand Prix.
Yeah.
So
totally.
I can relate to that. In 2010, that's when you decided to go off on your own, open your own farm, which I believe was called Callan Solem Stables. Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, and you did that with the help of Nia and Colin McNeil. So how did that all come about?
Right, exactly. It was actually Carol. She was getting older by then. She was wanting to retire and not travel as much and not have horses sort of on the road as much. And so I didn't want to quit, but I couldn't retire with her either because I was 30. So a friend, a really good friend of mine, worked for Mr. and Mrs. McNeil for their with their fox hunting horses. And so I was connected to them through her. And I was there for 11 years and we had a great run. VDL Wizard was their horse. He was a total game changer. He was really special horse. We did some very exciting things with him.
And was that also the time where you had a very serious accident? Was that in 2010 when you first got there?
Was. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, it was.
I'd love you to share that with our listeners because when I read your story, that's when I really realized how much strength you have and perseverance, because that was a pretty intense period for you.
It definitely was. I had just jumped clear basically in the million the week before with Torlando. And so this was just the following week at just a small sort of schooling show. And just these things happen. I ended up orbital fracturing my maxillary sinus, and my eye was sort of over by my ear, and they helivac'd me. I was fortunate because I was not unconscious, but my face looked bad enough that they helivac'd me to St. Luke's Trauma Center, which was amazing. So I was right away on rebreathing mask and whatever. And I did have a brain bleed that resolved overnight so I didn't have to have surgery, which was great. Honestly, I think it was so fortunate just that I looked bad, because it was really, like, you think about how many people, I mean, if I could have had that same level of concussion and if my face hadn't been basically crushed, then somebody's taking me in the car, maybe to the emergency room. I'm, 6 hours further from, and it's maybe a different outcome. I mean, I don't have any headaches. I don't have any, I am very fortunate to have come through that with no damage. It was tough in the beginning. Just having a TBI is difficult. I really wanted to show so badly. I think I showed like 3 weeks later at Harrisburg in the World Cup, and the horses took good care of me. But it was just sort of like those neural pathways are just a little stretched. So like if you would normally walk into your house and turn the light on, I would walk into my house, think it's dark in here, I should turn on the light switch is over there, and then I would turn. So it's just sort of everything was
slow.
For the reason that they don't want you to drive right away, or just your reflexes aren't great. And it's just, if I didn't sleep for 10 hours, it was like I didn't sleep at all. I'd say it was probably 7 months till I felt like 100%, but I could get by. Very, very fortunate. Could have been a lot worse.
And was it at that point that there was the chance that you might not have continued riding? Because I read a quote that really resonated with me from you that says, to take this away from me would be more than just the riding. It would be my life. Being a rider defines me. That really resonated with me, because being an older amateur rider, I can't tell you how many times my father has said to me, "You've had a good run."
Right.
And I'll think, I can't imagine my life without my horse and without competing, even if I'm doing it at a lower level. So was that statement at about that time? And I mean, just powerful words.
I think and there's so many of us that have done this. I mean, I know Margie Engel is another example of just that it's who she is, it defines her. And so she fights really hard to be able to stay doing it at the top level. I think, if I remember correctly, I think the context of that was about just that it's like, did I have any fear when I was coming back or whatever? And I said, sure. I mean, sure. But it's like, it's a choice though. Do you want to feel safe, or do you want to be you? And it's just, and it's like the fear is something that you can address and move through, and all the different things that we do to make ourselves feel comfortable in a super dangerous sport. That was the first time I felt like I actively had to choose that it was like, yes, I recognize the risk in this and I choose it. And that was sort of a part of a maturation process, like a coming of age, because I hadn't really been hurt significantly before that. So it was like the doctors were all, obviously, because it was head trauma and stuff, well, if you hit your head again in this amount of time, then this or that, all of those sorts of things. And I said, so you're telling me that we're worried about the part of my day where I wear a helmet? I said, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, what about when I go to get something out of the closet and something falls on my head and I don't,
Oh, wow. That's very, very clever words.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to shift gears now and talk a little bit about some of your former mounts and your current mounts, because I know we just touched on VDL Wizard and VDL Tornado. So maybe share a little bit about the journey with both those horses, because I know you had some great success with them. And
I did. They were so special to me. We could start with VDL Torlando, who I called Dennis was his barn name. I had gone to VDL stud for the first time with a client of mine at the time, Peter Ruig. I think that would have been 2005, maybe. No, 2006, I think. I rode him and I had to try to get him. I had to try to. So I came back and I tried to put a syndicate together, a group together to help to buy him. And it ended up being, there were like 12 people in it. And I made so many phone calls and got so many no's and so many, well, this isn't a great time or whatever. And I was like, I called, Yanko at VDL a couple of times and I said, I'm not going to be able, I'm only at like half of the money now. And if you need to sell him, like, go ahead, but I'm going to keep trying, but it just maybe isn't going to work. And then I stayed with it and it was just supposed to be. And so we ended up getting him. But again, I was 24, I think at the time, and I was doing it by myself. So again, I mean, like everything, like good luck, Callan. Like, and so I had gotten all this money together from all of these generous friends and just, it was the best group of people. Really, I couldn't have asked for a more supportive group. And so I went to the bank. I was going to wire the money. I did a DBA and got a bank account for him so everything could be like very transparent. And I was really trying my best to make sure this was very professional and as good as I could make it. So I went to the bank to wire the money. And I had not been hip to the fact that the exchange rate obviously fluctuates. So the money that I had gotten together was now like 20,000 short for the exchange rate of the day. So I call Yanko again, crying for like the second, third time, whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought I had it, but it's not. Blah, blah, blah. It was great. He let me just send some to a dollar account that they had, some to, anyway, he helped me work it out so that it was just, I'm telling you, that horse was really, I mean, just a horse of a lifetime. He was day, night, grass, sand, indoors, outdoors. I mean, he always tried his best. Even McLean would call him a ringer. Like he just always, he was so careful. He was such a hero to me. He had 165 ribbons in Grand Prix in his career with me. 12 years I rode him. And it's the only horse I never fell off of. And all that time. But he was, he was really special. I did my first Olympic trials on him. He was just absolutely phenomenal. He's retired in Belgium now and does a little bit of breeding and stuff. So with his first rider, who I named him after, who was Dennis van Tilburg in Belgium, rode him as a young horse, like in the 6-year-old finals and stuff before I got him. So he went back to be with his only other rider. So that was good.
Yeah. And have you ever had a baby?
Or
by him, I guess?
I think his oldest, are 4 now. So they're just sort of getting going, but
I think you should work that connection.
I know. Well, and they have some semen of his in Wellington. So I was thinking of maybe trying to breed one here even would be really cool. He was a really special horse to have in your string. He was one of the kinds of horses that made all the other horses go better just because of how much confidence he put into me. It was just every time, every class, he'd be like, come on, we can do this every time.
I love it. How about VDL Wizard?
VDL Wizard was, his athletic ability was beyond. I mean, when you watch the videos of him from the World Cup finals or from the Nations Cup in Rome or he was third in the million, he could use his body in a way that like sort of like a pole vaulter, where he could move his body around the jumps and he was just a genius. He was like really a show jumping savant. I mean, he just knew where the rails were all the time. He was like such a good competitor. He totally understood the sport, totally knew what the whole point of it was. And he loved a crowd. The bigger the crowd, the more cheering, the better he was going to go. And I would always know if he was going to really have a good class, he would whinny at the end gate. When you'd be waiting to go in next, he would whinny and I'd be like, all right, we got this. Like he was such a cool horse. I think, gosh, he won a lot of prize money. I think the one year he was second or third in having won the most prize money. And we won the Nations Cup in Jalapa in Mexico, which was awesome. He traveled, flew all over the world. And that was really, it's such a journey. We had the best time, and he was such a trustworthy companion. There's just nothing that he couldn't do.
Well, I think it's interesting too that you mentioned all the travel, because I'm not sure everybody that isn't involved with horses knows what that means as far as just the stress level on an animal. It's like us, except that they also have to adjust to a new environment, and cardiovascularly they're going to be.
And they didn't know they were about to do it. It's one thing when we know we have a big trip coming up, or when we know we have a big trip coming up, that's one thing, but it's hard. He definitely got really good at it though. If we were in Wellington, he would fly out of Miami, and usually either to in Amsterdam or Liège in Belgium. And he could fly KLM, or so sometimes in combis with other passengers, or sometimes cargo, depending on the situation. Yeah, he was a very, very good traveler.
And typically, how early would they ship for a competition? I've never asked anyone this.
No, we arrived in Gothenburg on Tuesday and jogged Wednesday. And so he would have flown maybe Thursday of the week before. And then he flew to Liège, and then he laid over at Clates in Germany for, I guess, 2 days, and then took the ferry, which was like 14 hours. Then,
oh my!
I don't know, and then sort of the rest of the way to Gothenburg. So it was definitely a lot of travel, and the trip to Rome was even more extensive. That was like days. And so we would a lot of times give him fluids because he wasn't a great drinker. So he would have to get fluids sometimes, but he always did very well.
And so now let's move forward to your current horses. I know one that I've had the pleasure of watching you on is Horian, which is your own horse. And he's 18 years old.
He is.
And I've heard that there's quite a story that he has plates and screws inside him, but I'm not sure for what. So maybe tell our listeners a little bit about him and what you've done with him. And then we'll also talk about your other mounts.
He's the best. He was a really prominent young horse and got sold to the Middle East, and then had an accident in jumping that broke his left hind pastern. And so he was a stallion at the time, so they gelded him and did the surgery on his leg. Then a friend of mine saw him in a field there and bought him and brought him back. And he is such a genius. He's really, I said if he were a person, he would never leave his house without a tie. Like he's very serious about his work. I enjoy him so much. He's such a good herd leader as far as like in the barn and everything. Like there's no, if we get a young horse in and it's screaming, he'll be like, hey, no, not in my barn. Like not, he has a lot, he's very strict. And same in the paddocks. If a horse starts running, he'll whinny to them, hey, you're going to get everybody brought in. Don't stop that. He's a good manager. Couldn't do it without him.
Oh, and how many years have you had him?
Well, I rode him for the owner for, I guess, 2 years-ish. And then I've had him for about a year. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you did get him a little bit later in life. I wasn't sure sort of when you started him. And so with someone that special and older, how do you pick and choose what you compete him in?
He sort of tells me when he feels ready. I think he's a good communicator. So, he just starts to act a little, he'll start to just nip a little bit, or be like, if I don't do a class soon, like I'm getting ready for a class, or If he acts sort of tired and disinterested, then he just takes it easy for a little bit. And he's pretty clear about when he wants to do something.
I was going to say, I love that. So it sounds to me like you're really in tune with your animals. And I do know that I was connected to your body workers, Lisa Stahl and Don
They're
Doran.
the best, aren't they? Oh my gosh.
They've been magical for my horse. So how did you get connected to them? And then I do know they talk so much about being connected with the animals.
There was a guy, Bill Stanton in Wellington that did some body work for me, like with Wizard and Torlando and stuff. I called him about a horse that I needed some help with, and he recommended them. But he said, you tell them that I gave you their number, or like they're not gonna want anything to do with you. Just so, like, they're very, very particular about the people that they work with. They're amazing. They do such a great job. I think it's a great relationship because I can sort of tell them where I think the problem, because it's, again, with the horses, with their behavior is the only way that they have to communicate with us. So being able to interpret that is super important, because I think it's really easy, whether in training or relative to vet work or anything, but where you're handling the consequences of problems, but not the actual problem. So it's like, again, are their hocks sore because of their back, or their back sore because of their hocks? And I think really paying attention to the horses, and every day where you think, well, where it's trending this way or that way. Anyway, I think all of that sort of attention to detail can help be able to decipher between what's a cause and what's an effect.
And would you say you were always tuned in? Is that something that was just instinctive in you from an early age, or is that something you learned from working with trainers? I'm curious because I've been around trainers that really don't seem to note those little details, and they think I'm a little obsessive compulsive about every movement my horse makes. And then I've met others that are absolutely in tune with it. Where did yours come from?
So I was an only child, and we lived sort of like on a farm with a bunch of animals. So I think the part about horses that was easiest for me, the sort of the most second nature to me, was understanding, again, if you pet a horse that you need to whip, or whip a horse you need to pet, you can set the whole thing back 6 months. And I felt like I always, just because of interacting specifically with animals for my whole beginning of my life, that I do understand, I think, what exactly the nuances of their behavior, and even just to be able to just sort of sit quietly and like wait for an answer. That sometimes, we just get rushing around day to day. And I think one of Dr. Kenny, who is one of my favorite vets of all time, and I probably learned the most about horses from him, he used to always say that when I was like 16, when I was first working for Carol, he worked for her. And he would come in, and one of the things he taught me to practice early on was, he said, when you walk in the stall, you just ask, your intention is what needs my attention. And if you sort of just make that a daily practice, it's amazing how you'll just walk over and pick up a foot that has a sprung shoe, or find something. But again, our relationship is in nonverbal communication. So we have to be quiet enough to hear them sometimes.
Sounds like you also have to listen.
Right. Absolutely.
You might have really enjoyed, I did an episode several months ago with an animal communicator, and I was fascinated with what she had to share. I was a little bit obsessed by the end, really wanting her to speak with my horse, because I thought, gosh, this should be part of regular maintenance.
I use one occasionally as well for things that I've jumped on.
So now moving forward, I know right now you're in Ocala. I'm not sure, when did you move to Ocala? And when did you start your relationship with Joan and Michael Burke? Because I know you have a few young horses with them, a Hunter and 3 Jumpers, and they all sound very lovely. And maybe you could share their stories with the listeners.
Thank you. Yes, I started my own business in the fall of 2022.
Okay.
And Joan and Michael were my first clients, and it's such a good match. I'm so grateful for them and for their support. And we really feel so similarly about the importance of the welfare of the horses. And I think we all really believe that when horses are doing well, they have their best results. but it's sort of like you can't skip those steps, and putting a solid foundation on these animals. Really, it takes a while to do it properly, but then the structure is secure and can withstand any of the undulations that sport offers. But if you skip steps, they show up eventually. And so I think we're really in line on that. And I appreciate their patience in letting me really try to make the very most of the horses that we have. We had a horse that we actually bought to be a jumper that we turned into a hunter, because I just felt like he just didn't want to go that fast. And he was everything. He had a great mouth, beautiful jumper, really capable, all these things. Every time I would go to really compete, he was like, boo. Like he just really didn't want to go that fast. And so we got him, and I said, I think he's going to love being a hunter. And then he won everything. And then we sold him to really top operation, and he's just done nothing but have success since. So that was really, it was an example of something that sort of wasn't what we meant to have happen, but still was really a good experience. And we're so happy that horse has a life that he can do well forever. We have a hunter that is now a young hunter that is so exciting. He's such a good athlete, so much fun to ride. He really is. I look forward to riding him every day. So that typically means he'll be sold soon, because it's really fun. He's really fun to ride. And then we have jumpers. We have a mare named Narnia, who is beyond. I mean, I can't believe we'd ever be able to part with her. I mean, I guess you never say never, but she is so special. And she's by Thunder Van de Zoethoven, so same as Azor. She's the kindest, most generous, brave, fast. She's great. I'm so excited about her.
And I have to interrupt you because I have seen you on Narnia.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, and really are a pair. I can't imagine her with someone else. So.
I just love her. I love her. I love to brush her. I love to feed her. I love to ride her. I mean, she's just the nicest horse to be around ever. Well, except for Cornetto Z, who I call CB. I went to Belgium with David Cameron, a friend of mine, in May last year, to look for some Grand Prix prospect. I was flying there, and I just thought, well, it's been a while since I've jumped like very big jumps. Maybe I'm too old. Like maybe I'm too scared ever. And then I rode Cornetto Z, and I was like, oh no, I felt like it was so easy for him. It was so much fun. I was like, oh gosh, this is awesome. So I told Joan and Michael that if it was okay with him, I wanted his barn name to be CB, because I thought he was a confidence builder. I was like, he's going to be good for my confidence, because he was just very similar to what I said about to Orlando, where it's just every time you turn to any jump, he's like, yeah, I got this. No problem. Again, he jumped his first Grand Prix last week and was double clear and fourth. And I could not have been more proud of him. He was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. That's amazing.
It was very exciting. Yeah, he was so into it. He was a good boy. So that is very exciting. And then we got also a mare who's by Cornet Obolinski. Damsire is in Doctorow. I think she's just going to be fierce. She's just she's such a strong personality in the best way. She does have to see my resume a lot as I'm trying to, I'll say, oh, can you do it like this? And who do you think you are? And I said, well, I've done this. And well, like what? It's like, so we have to go back and forth a little bit about that. But I think in the end of the day, when I do, she's more and more on my side all the time. And I think once I've proven myself to her well enough, she's the type of horse that would die for you. She's really, really special and very, very good athlete.
It's so interesting with her being a mare, because I've only ridden one mare in my life as a partner, but I remember feeling like when they give it to you, it's like their heart is in your hands, and there's no other way to describe it. So I'm excited for you.
And the thing is that people don't understand is like you could never take as much from a horse as a horse could offer to you. And so it's like to wait for them to be in a place of offering, and whatever, if she needs to see my resume, I'll show it to her. No problem. Whatever it takes, but it's like, you can't force that kind of generosity. And so it's like anything, like they're just relationships, all of them. And even understanding, it's important to me to spend a lot of time with them, because I think in understanding who they are helps me to make the best training choices that I can for them. It's like the football coach that before the big game goes to one guy's locker and he's like, listen, man, we're counting on you. You're our best player. The whole team's riding on you. You're such a star. This is your day, like whatever. And he goes three lockers down and he's like, listen, scumbag, you screw this up, you're off the team. It's like you sort of have to, and everything in between, but it's like you have to sort of know who they are to know how to motivate them properly. And this mayor wants some control in this. And so, okay, I can do that for you. If you will let me explain the sport to you, I can give you some ownership in how we do this. But you can't run it unless I show you what we're doing here. So it's like we're sort of back and forth about that. But she's really, really cool. I'm not scared of anything.
No, I can absolutely see what you mean by all of that. And I just love your description of you having to show your resume. It's like, yeah, we sometimes have to prove ourselves with
like,
the
who
horse.
do you think you are?
So what lies ahead for you? I know that you were shortlisted for the Olympic team in 2016, and it just didn't quite work because the timing wasn't quite right with your horse as far as maybe peaking. You were so close, it seems. I guess that most riders dream of wanting to ride in the Olympics, and yet you've also represented United States internationally. So it's not like you haven't been part of a team. Is the Olympic dream still something that you really hold on to?
I think as I've gotten older, my goals are a little more global in the sense that I would love, and my goal is to produce every horse that I have to the maximum capability that he or she has. The thing is though that you don't want to do something, I mean, like the Olympic Games or the Grand Prix next week, or where it's not right for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to do anything that isn't right for any horse ever.
Right.
But if I would sure love if I felt like I had a horse that had the capability and the sort of fire in his belly and love for the sport enough to do it. I feel grateful that I have the skills to produce. I certainly have done that level enough and with enough success that I could teach it to a horse that had that ambition and physical prowess and whatever. But I'm not remotely about ruining some horse's life over some dream of mine. That's not reasonable.
That's fair. I want to say thank you so much, Callan, for spending the time with me this morning and sharing your stories with our listeners. I wish you all the best and the best success. And I do look forward to seeing you in the ring with the new mounts, because I haven't had the pleasure of being in Florida to see that yet, but I am going to be shortly. I can only imagine with your attitude and your sensitivity with these new mounts that you're going to have every success that they deserve and you deserve.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Hey, you're very welcome. If you'd like to learn more about upcoming guests or previous episodes, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Horsetails with Cat.